Dr. Hoffman, this question may seem a little funny, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it intrigues me. Um, do you see any developments that may suggest to you that the balance of power between Europe and the Middle East may change in the coming decades or even a century?
Um,
And I'm not talking necessarily about conquering each other or anything
right,
like that.
right.
Yeah.
We could think about economic growth,
Yeah, there you go.
or um,
Sort of science, intellectual.
science, the
Yeah.
intellectual
Yeah,
side, rather than something like conquest. Um,
exactly.
well, you could ask, are there signs that it is changing? Well,
Mm.
if we think about the intellectual element, perhaps the most important part of the intellectual element is science. And I'm going to go back to revealed preference. Where do young men and women who excel in science, where do they go to study? Do they stay in the Middle East?
No, still Europe and the
Europe and
US.
the United States?
Yeah.
So that hasn't changed. That's the old review. Hey, it says something, or what they think is the best. Um, so what about the military? Well, maybe nuclear weapons would change that. Um, but would Middle Eastern powers be able to make a credible threat to use nuclear weapons? I mean, I hate to see something like this happen, but would that change? How about the economy? That's
If I may, before we get to the economy, aside from nuclear weapons, there are other things
oh
that
yeah,
they could develop, such as, like, for example, we hear on the news that Iran is providing drones to
right.
Russia in this
Yeah,
fight.
that's a good point because here's
Yeah.
a technology that you can acquire and improve on your own.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and
But the
Iran,
basis of that technology has come from the West.
yeah, but you can borrow it, you can buy it, you can buy the components, you can
Yeah.
make it. It's very hard to stop
Yeah.
the flow of ideas. So there are things like that could have a big impact. And drones are a great example because they've upended um, warfare in the past few years. Think of the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Um, um, or recent events in the Middle East. That's how about the economy?
Yeah.
Um, well, the GDP gap, the per capita GDP gap, is still there because you can look at migration flows, particularly for people with an important skill who can migrate.
Kind of like a brain drain from the Middle East.
Yeah, is there still a brain drain from the Middle East?
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah, uh, and that's so. What would change this? What would help promote economic growth in the Middle East? I keep coming back to political institutions. It's a pretty
Yeah.
tired refrain, but having political institutions that protect persons and property for a broad segment of the population, that are open and that can, with representative government, that can fund important um, public goods, transportation system, but also education. For modern economic growth, you not only need the leading scientists, you need people who can apply those new ideas, engineers who can apply ideas, or skilled workers who can operate um, uh, complicated computer-driven machinery.
Yeah.
Uh, to
Yeah.
take a U.S. example, decades ago, to get a job in a steel mill, all you needed was an ability to withstand heat and work hard and muscles. Today, you have to take an exam to see if you can, follow instructions on a computer controlled.
And those engineers, another point is that those engineers, experts, um, doctors, what have you, would also want to continue to live there and not just come and go, because
Exactly.
you get a lot of them that go to the Middle East now, but they're there for 5 years, 10 years, and they go
Exactly.
back.
Yeah. You see that in loads of places. My physician is from Egypt. Um, my late father was a structural engineer, and he and his partner sold their business to a bunch of, to several wonderful and highly talented engineers who'd come from the Middle East. Okay.
But they live here now in America.
Oh, they live here and they've lived here. They
Yeah,
were skilled employees. They'd become shareholders, and then they sold the business to them.
yeah. If you wanted our audience to remember just one point after everything we've talked about sort of the dominance of Europe and its offshoot nations such
Yeah.
as the U.S. vis-a-vis the Middle East, what would it be?
Okay, I think it would be this. Don't assume that military and economic strength are necessarily connected.
Oh,
You have to take Japan again. You don't have to be a military power to be strong economically. Now, someone has to provide defense, and Japan relies on the US.
exactly.
Um, uh, and the other thing, one point, but political or economic weakness in 1945 or 1914 doesn't mean uh, poverty or the lack of power 20 years from now. There's always the possibility. Well, I don't want to bet on North Korea, but there's always a possibility of economic growth. I mean, and North Korea is a great example. Well, military power, but a desperate economy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a
So
really great.
past poverty doesn't condemn you to poverty in the future. It'd
Yeah,
be good to have institutions that encourage investment in education, transportation, and provide security for persons and property.
yeah.
For
Dr. Hoffman, before I end our wonderful conversation, I just wanted to get clarification from one
yeah,
important point you made. As we were comparing Europe's and Middle East's economies going back to the 15th century and even before that, going back to 1000 AD, one of the metrics you used was the size of the cities. Remember, you said 13
yeah,
Eurasian cities. Um, is the size of cities still a relevant metric? Because in many parts of, let's say South America, Africa, Middle East, you have large cities
I'm poverty.
that are impoverished, right?
No,
That's
no,
no.
it isn't.
Okay, okay.
It
That's
isn't. It's a measure that works fairly well for the era up into the 19th century, maybe.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. But then
there,
transportation and everything
oh
changes.
yeah, and
Yeah, yeah.
certainly
Supply
post
chains. Yeah,
20th century, it's not a good measure necessary.
got it. Dr. Hoffman, thank you so much for educating me and our listeners. And to our listeners, if you know of any history that could provide more perspective from the past on this subject, please share it with us and tell us what's your perspective. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right.
So,
Thanks so much. Very much enjoyed it.